Hi, welcome to Moments with Marilyn. I'm your host, Marilyn Boyer, the mom of 14 homeschool kids who love the Lord and love each other. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, today we have two exciting guests to interview. I am so excited to have them share their message with you. It's Hal and Melanie Young. They're the mom and dad of 6 boys and 2 girls, and they've homeschooled them from the start. Now, guys, I don't remember exactly when Rick and I met you. You might remember, but it's been a long time. Do you remember?
There's at least 5. I think it's about 5 children ago.
It was. I was thinking about that earlier, and I believe I know, at least when we met Rick. I remember talking to Rick in line at the HSLDA convention in Boston in 1997.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
That was a fun one. That was great.
Yeah, so we've known each other a long time.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
We have Hal and Melanie speak. You know, you'll see them on the circuit. If you want to have them speak to your group, contact them. And at the end of the podcast, we'll let them give their information to tell you how to contact them.
All right.
But first of all, guys, tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, you got the first part. We have 8 children. We have 6 boys, and then God gave us 2 girls to kind of mix things up at the end.
And the boys are all grown up. They're all adults now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so we are an all-girl family, which is very weird.
Yeah, I get it.
That's a change.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's for all kinds of new things in the Hal's life.
Nail polish.
Yeah.
Tell us a little. Yeah,
polish.
Right.
Well, yeah.
It's different. It really is.
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about what you guys do to connect with homeschoolers and parents.
Well, I guess the first thing is we've been homeschooling since they did the movable type. And so we started talking about homeschooling to different groups, local groups, and then state groups quite a few years ago. And
For the past, I don't know, 13 years or so, we have had a ministry where we speak about raising sons, about parenting preteens is a big deal. That's a really challenging time in parenting where a lot of people see the parent-child relationship broken.
Yeah.
And biblical sexuality and all kinds of dicey topics like that. And we publish a subscription box too. So we do all kinds of things.
Okay. Wow. There's so many. We'll have to just interview you guys again because you've got so much info out there to help people. And, you know, we have 8 girls and 6 boys, but we started out with 4 boys before we had any girls. So I can attest that it's really different raising girls than boys. Tell us what you feel some of the special challenges are of raising boys. You know, when I think about experts in raising boys, I think of you guys.
Well, that's what we really started speaking about the most, just because people look at us. We had 4 boys at the time. They say, "How do you manage?" You know, I think the major thing with boys is to recognize that their emotional and their intellectual wiring is different than girls, including mom.
Yeah.
And particularly as they're moving into the preteen times when the differences really come to the fore, a lot of moms are saying, "I don't understand this boy."
I think that's a big thing, is understanding what's normal for boys and understanding what God is trying to accomplish in them.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was hard when we started out. It's very hard now because our culture doesn't really have any idea that there is a difference between boys and girls, much less what it is.
Yeah.
You know, and boys really are getting the short end of the stick here because the things that are natural to them are being disrespected by the world.
Yeah.
You know, protectiveness, aggressiveness, competitiveness, the things that are natural to them are not really regarded well right now, especially not in males.
Right.
Yeah.
And that makes it hard. It makes it hard to, you know, we do want to raise boys who are compassionate and caring and gentle without making them weak and timid and fearful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
well, I think you know.
Yeah. Go ahead, Al.
Well, I think really the critical thing is recognizing that we have the example of the perfect man. You know, that Jesus Christ is the example, and he is both the compassionate good shepherd, and he's also the one who will judge the world and rule with rod of iron. I mean, he is not a weak a weak person, a weak role model at all, but his strength is always in the proper channels and in the proper application. And that's what we really have to teach our sons, to say, look, God's gifted you with strength, with ambition, with aggression, all these other things. We need to teach you how to manage that, how to ride that horse and not be carried away by it.
How to submit it to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And teach them the character qualities of Christ. I mean, that's our example. But I can attest that their boys are great. I've met their boys on the homeschooling circuit. I love their boys. They're godly men. It's so exciting.
They are a blessing to us. And that's something I didn't anticipate about this, about having a big family, is how amazing it would be when they got grown.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you're in the trenches and it seems like you're telling them stuff that's going in one ear and out the other. But when they're adults, that's when the payoff comes. That's when
really
all your years of investment, you get to see the fruit of your labor. And it's not easy. It's not easy raising kids. So how can parents in this culture resist the feminization of boys?
Well, recognizing that God has created them differently for different reasons. I mean, for different purposes and focuses in life. And we do best as parents when we cooperate with what God's created and not say, I wish you were more like your sister.
Yes. Exactly. To say, okay, I don't understand why this guy wants to play war all the time, but let me teach him to play war righteously. let me teach him to fight the bad guys, to be a good guy. Let me teach him how to be merciful, how to be strong, how to be brave. And instead of trying to teach him not to play battle.
Right. I remember one of my sons, when we were doing school academics, he'd say, can I go jump on the trampoline and wake up my brain? And I'd say, please go jump on the trampoline and wake up your brain. And boys, they need to move more than girls. They're different. They're wired different.
The research actually shows that they learn better when they've been using those big muscle groups. And so when we say, we often talk to moms who are like, I just don't understand about 10 o'clock, my kids just come to pieces and my boys can't sit still and they're fighting. And I say, well, what do you do? And she says, well, I tell them we just have 4 more subjects to go, concentrate.
Yeah.
And I'll say, how's that working for you? And
she
says,
it's not doing anything. Yeah.
And so instead, how about saying, okay, let's run up and down the stairs 10 times.
Yeah.
Let's do some push-ups. Let's get out and let's use those big muscles.
Run out to the mailbox. Mom, it's a half a mile back to the road. That's okay. Run out to the mailbox.
Absolutely.
And
I remember my kids, one of my boys quoting scripture, kind of hanging off the end of the couch upside down. It's just how he could think best.
Well, yeah, that's the amazing thing. They are thinking and they are listening and they are learning in times when you think, how in the world? There's no way. I mean, because we saw that when we started homeschooling our older 2, and you think that you're talking to the older one, and the second one is just playing on the carpet or he's staring out the window or something. And if you ask him a question, he would just say, "Oh," and he would rattle it back. Okay, so he was getting it. He just doesn't look like it.
We have this idea that learning has to happen sitting at a desk with light coming over your left shoulder and sitting still and quietly. But really, your boys may learn better if they're lying on the floor playing with their Legos while you're reading aloud to them, or hanging upside down on the couch. I might have listened to many things with their feet in the air and their heads off the couch.
Yeah.
But actually moving those muscles and moving around can help them to concentrate. It's like have you ever seen somebody train a black lab to keep a Cheeto on its nose? And you can put the Cheeto on the dog's nose and the dog will sit there until you tell it can eat it. But there's nothing going on in that dog's brain except don't eat the Cheeto.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And when sometimes we have our boys sitting still so long that they're using all their brain power to sit still, and there's nothing left to learn with.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
And
it really
that's counterproductive.
So it's just recognizing that restlessness is sort of wired into it, particularly when they're younger. they can be trained and they can learn to sit still as they get older. You're talking a 5, 6, 8-year-old boy. I mean, there's not a lot of ability to rein that in. And so you say, okay, he needs to get up and move around. He needs to run up and down the stairs a couple of times or do some sit-ups here real quick. That's just cooperating with the way that he is right at this moment to get through the day so that he's got the brain enough to learn reading or multiplication or whatever you're trying to teach.
Yeah.
And it really is amazing what they can learn. I think, too, parents need to understand that boys tend to start out kind of rocky in school. They struggle with sitting still. They struggle with writing. Small motor skills are very hard for them in the early years.
Yeah.
My girls were like, can I do another worksheet? My boys were like, please don't make me do another worksheet.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And parents can start thinking that, academics it's not for him. And that's not true. Is that boys develop differently than girls. And boys hit their academic growth spurt all the way over in high school. And so you've got a boy who struggles to sit still, struggles to pay attention. He may be a late reader. We had one who didn't read till he was 11. He is severely dyslexic. And you just think, oh, there's just no hope. And then they hit high school. And, I had one who at 14, I'm thinking, oh, I can hope I can teach him enough to fill out an application at McDonald's. And at 17, he's reading ancient philosophers for fun. And at 19, he's in college on a full ride academic scholarship, double major.
Yep.
But you wouldn't have predicted that at 14.
No.
Right.
And so parents need to be careful not to be discouraged. Boys developing later in academic areas, they develop earlier in some other areas, but later in academic areas does not mean that they're not going to love academics. One of our little super active guys is about to get his PhD. But could I have predicted that at 7 when he couldn't sit still? No way.
Absolutely. We have our 12th child was a very slow reader. He was 12 before he learned to read. And he had a very logical mind. He was so frustrated with here's a rule, here's an exception. One day he said, Mom, the guy that wrote the English language must have had a pen in one hand and a jug in the other. But like you say, when he finally got it, he got it. And he was reading Locke's 2 treatises of government. Now he's in seminary. He skipped college. He's in seminary. He's got all A's. It's just when it finally clicked, it clicked. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way God made him.
Yes.
It's good to take the long view to say, you know what, I'm training this young man and I'm not going to see the real fruit of it. I shouldn't expect to see the fruit of it until they're 18, 19, 20 years old, because it's a long process and there's a lot of steps along the way. And some of them will just blossom and flourish when they're younger. And some of them, it's going to be later.
Yeah.
But by the time they're in their 20s, you should be seeing what you've been working on. So
absolutely. No one will ever know how old they were when they learned to read.
Yeah. So don't look at them. Don't look at them when they're 12.
It's not a race.
12 and say, don't give up.
Absolutely. Okay, let's address heroes. Can you tell us, I know you guys are strong on heroes. We are too. What role do you feel heroes play in raising boys correctly?
They are examples.
Yes.
That is the thing. That you want to give your sons examples from history or from fiction or from current events, whatever, to say, this is a man who is a good example of integrity, of courage, of the proper use of strength, whatever.
Yeah.
And, one of the things we talk about when we talk about heroes, recognize that they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And some of them, it's just courage in the face of an illness. Some of them, it's courage in the face of wild animals and persecution. And so you just have to say, son, let's see what we can learn from this person's life. And that should give you some encouragement to look at the challenges that come into your life and think, well, I wonder how George Washington might have handled that. I wonder how Patrick Henry would have thought of this, or what would, Theodore Roosevelt have done in this situation. And, it gives them kind of a touchstone to say, beyond just the principle, we want them to learn principles, but you got to take principles into application.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and heroes help you take the principles into application. And heroes can come from anywhere, from the Word of God, hopefully, from history, from literature, from real life, from current events. What we do as parents is we help our kids develop the right heroes by pointing out to them the heroic things we see as we watch things with our kids, as we read things with our kids, pointing out the virtues that we see in those characters, pointing out the failings that we see in characters too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's really important because I think a lot of our culture right now, oddly enough, our culture wants to be so absolutely black and white that they have a hard time saying, that this person in history might have done wonderful things in the founding of our country, but he owned slaves. Off with his head. We don't want to talk about him anymore.
Yeah.
And, we can look at them and say, you know what? Here's a man of his time who did not go as far as his beliefs should have taken him.
Yes, he should not have held slaves.
Or any of another.
These things he did well, these things he did badly.
Yeah.
Because we're all sinners,
Right.
There's none righteous, no, not one. And so we need to clearly point out, what? Holding slaves was wrong. And standing up for freedom was right. And as we hold up those things to our kids, we help them to understand, emulate this, don't emulate that.
Well, and that is biblical, because you look at the scriptures and you see, what did it say about King David? God himself said, David was a man after my own heart, and he sought me in everything except in the matter of Uriah the Hittite. He talks about that one scandalous incident in David's life, and it never ducks the fact of his failing, but it says, what is the overall character of this man's life? Where was this man's heart in all of his dealings, except when he failed to follow what he needed best?
Well, I've been reading Genesis in my devotions this week, and wow, you read that and you think these people did a lot that was wrong.
Right.
And yet God still had mercy on them. He forgave them.
Right.
He used them. He used them as his people. And that's what we need to show our kids. When we try to make things totally black or white, we only have heroes that are perfect. First of all, no hero is perfect. And your kids are going to find that out.
Yeah.
But when we say instead, here's a hero, emulate these godly things. Here are some things he did that were wrong and we shouldn't emulate, but God still used him, and he can use you and he can forgive you, and use everything to point it to the gospel.
Yeah, that's so true. And God and your kids can learn from the mistakes that they made. They can learn from the things they did right and the consequences they got for doing wrong. To me, kids, if you teach them history through people, the lives of people, they remember it. They get a lot of facts in the process, but they don't forget it because they're studying real live people.
Yeah,
and what
makes
they did
come
right.
alive.
Okay, how do you guys handle TV, films, internet? I mean, when I was raising my kid, it was in many ways easier than parents have it now, because there wasn't internet. I mean, till the very later years. How do you handle that?
I believe that it is a continuum, that a young child needs very careful protection because their senses are not developed. They haven't been taught. They need careful protection and controlling what they have access to and what they see and what they read. By the time our children are ready to be out in the world, by the time they're ready to be adults, they need to be exposed to a lot of things that are mixed and learn how to navigate that. What's that verse, Hal?
Oh, it's in excuse me, Hebrews 5:14, I think, which says that the milk is for the immature, it's for babes, but it's solid food is for the mature, who by reason of use have their senses trained to discern good from evil. That doesn't mean, all right, let's all go out and get drunk this weekend so you can see what a bad thing is, but rather to say, all right, son, here, let me show you something here. You see, this is bait. And this pathway that they would like to turn you down leads to a lot of destructive things that you don't want to go to. So you got to recognize that there are choices ahead of you. And sometimes it's really obvious. Sometimes it's not. So how do you evaluate these choices when they show up? How do you think this through biblically? So that's what we do, like with entertainment. We watch films with our older kids that we don't watch with our younger kids. And we say, okay, now what's the basic underlying story that's being told? What is the theme of this message? Is that true or is it not true? Is it sort of true in some situations, but maybe not in others. And we talk that through so that when they are confronting, whether it's entertainment or advertisements or news stories or real life interactions, they're always thinking, what does the scripture tell me about this? Have I ever seen this
Absolutely.
before?
Well,
Yeah.
here's a good example. All Creatures Great and Small, delightful book series. But I remember when we were reading this with our preteens,
Mhm.
and one of my friends said, "I can't believe you're reading that with kids." I said, "Why?" And she said, "He gets drunk in it." I said, "Yes, he gets drunk and he humiliates himself."
Mhm.
And so my kid's reaction to reading about that was, "Oh no, he's going to do it again. I never want to do that."
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
when we read these things that have some mixed content with our older kids, our preteens and teens, then we can help them to make the right decisions with them. We can use them as examples, good and bad. We can teach them to discern good from bad, to figure out what they ought to allow in their own lives and what they ought not to. Because at some point, they're going to be adults and they need to be able to discern this stuff for themselves.
Absolutely. You're teaching your kids to think and be discerning and run everything through scripture as the grid. Scripture has the answers to everything in life.
Exactly.
So we need to teach our kids how to think. That's exactly what you're doing. In your book, you talk about the role of adventure. Can you explain that to us in raising boys?
I think boys have a very strong desire for adventure, and that can get them in trouble or it can lead them to do amazing things.
Yeah.
And so I think it needs to be directed. and so we encourage adventurousness through reading exciting books
Mhm.
and seeing exciting movies, maybe going exciting places as a family if we can, but to say, okay, what is the proper role of adventure? Is that to get away with as much as you can and get in trouble? Or is it instead, that the proper use of adventure is to say, maybe I can reach this tribe with the gospel. Maybe I can start a new business that will support my family and help my community. It's the adventurousness is there. You can tell that what boy hasn't said, "Hey mom, watch this," and then jumped off something. The adventurousness is there. You just have to direct it in healthy, good ways.
Yeah, and I think you need to. I think you need to be careful not to undersell or undervalue the adventure of living as a grown up.
Yes.
To say, hey, son, you know what? You're 16. Let's get your driver's license.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of young people out there that are waiting until they're in their 20s because there's just so much responsibility. But to say, hey, you're 16, I think you're able to handle this. Let's teach you how to drive properly and carefully.
Whether they want to or not.
Yeah.
That's something that I think a lot of homeschoolers are missing right now is they are letting fear drive their parenting.
Yeah.
And that fear is bleeding over to their kids and it's crippling their kids. Like you said, we've talked to 25-year-olds who are afraid to get their driver's license.
Wow.
Because it's a big responsibility. They didn't come up with that on their own.
Yeah.
They learned that from their parents. And,
Yeah.
have we really succeeded in raising warriors for Christ if they're afraid to get in the car and drive to the store to get a loaf of bread? Honestly,
Yeah.
that's messed up.
Yeah.
We need to be careful not to let fear drive us or to drive our boys. If I see one of ours was very hesitant about getting a driver's license, and we said, "No, I'm sorry, you need to." And we taught him, and he learned, and he did great.
Mhm.
Don't let fear drive you.
That's a great point. I think even with all this coronavirus stuff, fear is driving so many people. I mean, they're afraid to live. So,
Yes.
I really think fear is something we really need to watch.
Well, that's something that research has shown that this next generation, the like 15 to 25-year-olds right now, that the thing that they most have in common is fear.
Wow. I believe it.
And that was before coronavirus.
Yeah, that was before Corona.
Before the
Yeah.
virus showed up. That's what one of the psychologists that researches demographics for generations that said this is a fearful group. They're afraid of responsibility. They're afraid of consequences. They want security more than they want to step forward in a lot of places. And that's something that we as parents need to be aware of and encourage our kids to get past. And to recognize
That makes me afraid for the future.
well, and to recognize too, and this is something we need to kind of consider. in our homeschooling environment, maybe we've got the culture that we need to have, but our kids are going to graduate and they're going to move out into the rest of that culture.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
their colleagues, their classmates in college, their coworkers on the job or whatever are going to be those fearful kids who grew up expecting monsters under the bed. I mean, literally. And so we need to be preparing them to say, look, you need to go out and be courageous,
Yeah.
be logical,
Be strong.
be compassionate, but not to be fearful.
Yeah.
Because perfect love casts out fear.
Mhm.
You know, we who know the King of Kings, we don't have to be afraid. We don't have to fear the future. We don't have to fear any man.
That's great. What about manners? How did you teach your boys manners?
Constantly,
I'm a Southern mama. You just require it.
repeatedly.
You don't talk to me that way.
It doesn't just happen overnight. It doesn't just happen naturally, does it?
No, son, stand up behind your chair at the table. You're not going to eat that way in front of me. We grew up in old Southern families where manners were not optional, and they haven't been optional in my house. The nice thing about that is we don't know where the Lord's going to take our children. And we've had one of our kids studied at Oxford University in England and sat at dinner with Duke's sons. And if you have nice manners, if you know how to comport yourself well wherever you are, then you're not going to be ashamed to sit wherever God places you.
Yeah.
It really matters when you think about it. Manners are kind of two aspects. One of them is consideration for other people's feelings.
Yes.
And the other one is self-control.
Yeah.
And those are character traits we want our sons and our daughters to have in all situations. And it just, in etiquette situations, those two come to the front.
Yeah. And it's really not about what fork to use. It's about looking around and being observant around you and seeing what will make the people around you comfortable.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know, I felt like we did a good job teaching our older kids manners, but then the younger kids, we kind of let it go. And then we thought, wow, what are we doing? We need to teach them too. So I think if you've got a lot of kids, that's something you need to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I had the same realization. It's been very casual around here during the pandemic. And I realized, we're not even eating at table a lot of times. We're eating in our laps just as catch can. And I realized, you know what? My 12-year-old needs a little help here. We need to watch this because we're not eating out like we normally would. We're not going out with a lot of other people like we would to eat a meal at a restaurant. And so, I've had to say, okay, let's talk about this.
How did you prepare your teenage sons for the teenage years, for courtship, for marriage?
Well, we have a book about this actually called Love, Honor, and Virtue, about biblical sexuality for boys. It's aimed at ages 12 and up. I think we've been very frank talking about issues as we see them in the culture, as they come up in our Bible reading, preparing our boys to fight what is really probably the greatest sin battle that most of our young people will face. How to stay away from internet porn. As far as marriage and finding a mate, I personally think the homeschool movement has, we've seen some swings of the pendulum where it said, oh, I don't want my kids to do what I did. Bam, we're going to go against all the way to the other side, and I'm going to arrange their marriage or whatever. And that didn't work either. And I think what we need to do is teach our kids to act like believers.
Well, I think we can all agree that our 10-year-olds don't need to be in passionate love affairs. But you know what? If we expect our 18, 19, 20-year-olds to be in the market, so to speak, for a marriage partner and life partner, that there's got to be a transition in there. And so as our kids, particularly as they're going through their teenage years, we encourage them to have lots of friends of the opposite sex.
Yeah.
Not have a girlfriend, but friends who are girls, maybe the boys, or vice versa, because that takes a lot of the tension off and allows them to start to understand the opposite sex.
What we tell our kids is, there is no one way to find a mate any more than there's one salvation story. Because, salvation is a picture marriage is supposed to be a picture of Christ in the church. And, God doesn't woo all of us the same way. In the same way, no one's love story is going to look exactly like someone else's, and you can't script it like that. You can't say this is the only way you're going to do this. What we ask of our kids is that you do what's right, that you stay holy, you don't drift off into sexual sin, and that you act like a believer. Because if you act like a believer, then that answers most of the questions.
Right.
If you just act like a Christian, treat people honestly and above board and with respect and, without sin, then does it really matter exactly what you call it or whether they find their mate at college or at work or in church? It doesn't really matter. If you follow the few simple rules that God has given us, you marry another believer, you don't commit sexual sin, you talk it through with the people who care and love about you. That's it. That's all that we pretty much tell our kids, because I think we need to be really careful making rules where scripture doesn't.
I agree. I know, I assume you guys did this too, but we opened our home and invited all our kids' friends in. I mean, our home was busy when our kids were teens, because we just opened it. We had a lot of what we call adopteds. I mean, we just made our home a place where kids wanted to hang out, did fun stuff, and they'd get to know each other just as friends,
And and it's really amazing seeing your kids finding their mates and falling in love and getting married, having their own children. And I saw the other day a mom was saying, "Oh no, my son's moving into men's clothes. I'm so horrified." And no, good times are coming, honey. This is going to be great.
Yeah. Each season is precious in its own way. And I think instead of trying to hang on to, keeping them little, we need to embrace the season that they're in.
Yes.
Right. And that's, I say that like our last child moved out of our home in August. So our home that was so busy for so many years is now, there's no kids here. So it's very different.
Okay, but see, if you train them and let them grow up, then they start bringing the grandchildren.
Absolutely.
Right?
We've got plenty of them. That's right. And it's a blessing. I mean, I cannot, these young moms, it seems like you're always going to have little kids. You're always going to be overwhelmed, but you're not. Time goes so fast. Your family grows fast. And, in closing, what encouragement do you guys have for moms and dads? Like, what would you say to them?
Don't give up. It's not a sprint. It's going to be a marathon, and you will discover new things at every stage with each child, and in its time, it's all good.
Yeah.
I think what I would say is the things that really freak us out, getting the schoolwork done, getting the housework done, all that stuff is fading and passing away.
Yeah.
That what will really matter when you get to the end, when your kids move out of your home, what will really matter is the relationship you have with them and the discipleship that you've given them.
Absolutely.
And that is what you will really care about. And so if it comes between, we've got to get the schoolwork done, or I need to work out this problem between two siblings, you work out the problem between the two siblings.
Absolutely.
If it's between, I've got housework to do, dinner is late, and I have a child who's hurt and offended with me, I deal with the child who's hurt and offended with me. Yeah. And that means my house is a lot messier and school's a lot less done than I would prefer.
Yeah.
But I don't want to have regrets when they leave.
No. And we look back now at our older kids, and we realize that the things which really made them the men that they are, and we only say that because the girls are still
right.
Yeah.
The things that made the adults that they are were those times where we built character and we built relationship. And school happens, and they'll get it from you, or they'll get it from the next teacher.
Yeah. Or they'll get it from the internet. I mean, they can Google what an adverb is, Mom. We freak out about these things that aren't that important in the long term. Yeah. And we're academic fanatics. Hal and I love to learn. We talk about ideas all the time. But you know what? What matters is relationship and discipleship.
Absolutely. Relationship is it. Okay, guys, you have been so inspiring. Will you tell folks how to get in touch with you, what resources you have, like whether you've got a blog, podcast? Tell us about it.
Okay.
Right.
You can find our blog and store at raisingrealmen.com. You can find our podcast at halandmelanie.com/radio. You can find out how to invite us to speak at halandmelanie.com. And we have a subscription box that teaches artisanal craft skills to teens and adults. And you can find that and in totally complete kits, no trips to the store. And you can find that at craftsmancrate.com. And if you go to raisingrealmen.com/Boyer, I'm going to put some coupons and some freebies there for you, just for your group.
Super. Can you send me all those little links that you just told people,
Sure.
and I will put them in the show notes so they can just.
Awesome. Be glad to.
That's great. Guys, thanks so much. You've been such an inspiration. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a delight
Thank
to
you
talk
for
to you,
having us.
Marilyn.
And say hey to your kids for me, okay?
We'll
Do that.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.